Simulation theory, the hidden code of reality. For as long as humans have gazed at the night sky, walked through forests, or dreamed in the silence of their own minds, they have wondered whether what they experience is the whole of reality or just a shadow of something deeper. The thought that the world might be an illusion, or at least not the final truth, is as old as philosophy itself. But in recent times, as our technologies have grown more complex and our metaphors more digital, this ancient question has taken on a startlingly modern form. What if we are living in a simulation? What if reality itself is not a bedrock of atoms and forces, but a vast computation, a coded environment designed, maintained, and perhaps even manipulated by an intelligence beyond our comprehension? Simulation theory is not merely a playful thought experiment. It sits at the intersection of philosophy, mysticism, computer science, and physics, demanding that we re-examine everything we think we know about the world. If matter is information, then the universe is not a place but a process, not a thing but an execution of code. In such a perspective, what we call reality may be no more substantial than the images on a screen, generated moment by moment according to rules written long before we were born. Just as a video game character cannot perceive the circuits that sustain its world, we may be blind to the computational lattice that underlies our existence. Yet this is not a purely modern thought. Ancient traditions intuited the unreliability of appearances long before the first silicon chip was built. The Hindu concept of Maya, the illusory fabric of the world, suggested that what we perceive is a veil hiding a deeper truth. In Buddhism, the notion that reality is dreamlike and impermanent echoes with uncanny similarity to the modern suggestion that our universe is rendered in a transient way. Plato's allegory of the cave, with its prisoners mistaking shadows for reality, can be read as an early version of the simulation hypothesis, the recognition that what we take as real might be only the projection of hidden machinery. Gnostic thinkers imagined the demiurge, a flawed cosmic architect, creating a false world that traps souls. Each of these metaphors, old and new, points to the suspicion that what we call reality may be both real and unreal, convincing enough to inhabit, but deceptive enough to be questioned. The digital revolution has given this ancient intuition new teeth. As virtual reality headsets transport us into convincing landscapes and AI generates voices, images, and conversations indistinguishable from organic ones, the boundary between simulation and real life blurs. Already, we live in multiple realities at once. Our physical existence intertwined with digital avatars, online worlds, and algorithmic structures that shape how we see, think, and interact. The more convincing our simulations become, the harder it is to dismiss the possibility that our own reality is itself one layer of an infinitely nested code. If we can create simulated beings who believe they are real, might not we ourselves be such beings, living inside someone else's design? At the same time, physics itself increasingly resembles a form of computation. The discreteness of quantum events, the mathematical nature of natural laws, and the informational theories of black holes all suggest that the universe is less like a machine of gears and more like a program running on an unfathomable substrate. To ask whether the universe is a simulation is not to indulge in fantasy, but to confront the implications of science's own discoveries. Even the so-called glitches, moments of déjà vu, synchronicity, and anomalies in consciousness, can be framed as artifacts of a coded environment straining to render complexity. But what does this mean for us as conscious beings? If we are avatars in a simulation, are we prisoners or participants? Are we victims of a cosmic trick or students in a classroom of code? To live as though reality is a simulation is to see life differently. Obstacles become puzzles, synchronicities become hints, and meaning is found not only in the visible, but in the hidden architecture beneath. This does not diminish our humanity, but amplifies it, for it suggests that we are more than flesh and blood. We are also consciousness interacting with patterns of information, perhaps with the ability to alter the code through awareness, creativity, or spiritual practice. This volume explores simulation theory not only as a scientific hypothesis, but also as a spiritual metaphor, a bridge between ancient mysticism and modern technology. It is a story of shadows and codes, of programmers and dreamers, of glitches and revelations. Whether or not we live in a literal simulation is ultimately less important than how the metaphor reshapes our understanding of ourselves, our cosmos, and our place within it. If life is a game, then learning its rules is essential. But so is the realization that we, too, are more than players. We are also fragments of the intelligence that designed the game. Chapter 1: Ancient Shadows of the Virtual. Long before microchips, algorithms, or virtual reality headsets, humanity wrestled with the suspicion that the world was not what it seemed. Though we tend to think of simulation theory as a product of the digital age, it echoes questions that have haunted philosophy, religion, and mysticism for millennia. To the ancients, the suspicion of illusion was not phrased in the language of computation, but of shadows, dreams, veils, and artifices. Their myths and philosophies reflected a deep unease with appearances, a recognition that what meets the eye is only a thin layer of reality, concealing deeper mechanisms or truths beneath. What we call simulation theory today is thus a modern expression of an ancient intuition that life may be staged, orchestrated, or projected, and that the self may be more than the role it plays within the performance. One of the earliest and most famous articulations of this suspicion can be found in the dialogues of Plato. In the Republic, the allegory of the cave presents humanity as prisoners chained in darkness, forced to watch shadows cast upon a wall. To the prisoners, the shadows constitute reality. They know nothing of the objects outside the cave that cast those shadows, nor of the sun that illuminates them. Plato's allegory is often interpreted as a metaphor for education and enlightenment, but it also resonates powerfully with the simulation hypothesis. The prisoners are like avatars in a coded environment, perceiving a limited and mediated reality, mistaking projection for substance. The true world, Plato suggests, is not the visible one but the higher realm of forms, abstract, eternal truths that lie beyond perception, much like a deeper level of code beneath a rendered simulation. In modern terms, Plato was hinting that reality might be a processed output of a more fundamental order. This theme reemerges in the mystical traditions of the East. In Hinduism, the concept of Maya describes the phenomenal world as a veil of illusion, convincing but ultimately deceptive. According to the Vedantic sages, the universe as perceived by the senses is a kind of grand performance, masking the deeper reality of Brahman, the unchanging absolute. Maya is not merely trickery, but an indispensable stage of existence, through which the soul journeys until it realizes the truth. This resonates with the notion that a simulation, however illusory, is a purposeful environment for experience, growth, and awakening. In some interpretations, even the gods are bound by Maya, suggesting that illusion is not an accident but a cosmic design woven into the very fabric of existence. Buddhism offers a parallel yet distinct view. The doctrine of impermanence and emptiness suggests that all things lack inherent reality. To cling to appearances is to be deceived by the dreamlike flow of phenomena. The Buddha himself often compared existence to a dream, a bubble, or a mirage. In the Diamond Sutra, he describes all conditioned things as fleeting and insubstantial, urging practitioners to awaken from the dream of attachment. Here again is the idea of the world as simulation, not in the sense of being artificially programmed, but in the recognition that what we call reality is a shifting projection of mind and perception. The Buddhist emphasis on awakening can be read as a call to step outside the code, to cease identifying with the fleeting avatars of self, and to recognize the underlying consciousness from which all arises. The Gnostics of the early centuries of the Common Era framed the question with startling boldness. They imagined a flawed creator, the demiurge, who fashioned a false material world to entrap human souls. To them, the cosmos was not a divine masterpiece, but a counterfeit, a prison designed to keep humanity from recognizing its true origin in the realm of spirit. The demiurge was not unlike a cosmic programmer, constructing a simulation that distracted souls from their divine essence. In this worldview, salvation meant escaping the false code and reconnecting with the ineffable source beyond. The language may differ, but the underlying suspicion is familiar. Reality as presented cannot be trusted, for it is constructed by powers that may not have our best interests at heart. These ancient ideas, while separated by geography and culture, converge on a single insight: appearances are not ultimate. Whether through Plato's shadows, Hinduism's Maya, Buddhism's dreamlike impermanence, or Gnosticism's counterfeit world, humanity has long entertained the possibility that we live within a grand deception. The metaphors shift with context: shadows, veils, dreams, prisons, but the intuition remains constant. Reality is not what it seems, and the task of the seeker is to pierce the illusion, to discover the truth beyond appearances. In indigenous traditions, too, this theme appears. Many shamanic cultures describe the visible world as only one layer of reality, beneath which lie other worlds accessible through altered states of consciousness. In these cosmologies, the material world is less real than the dream worlds, which are often considered the true source of power and meaning. Vision quests, trance journeys, and dream walks are methods of piercing the veil, moving beyond the simulated surface of reality into its deeper architecture. Here, again, is the idea that waking life is but one level of the game, and that hidden dimensions exist for those who know how to access them. What stands out in these ancient visions is not only their suspicion of reality, but their insistence that illusion has a purpose. The shadows of the cave are meant to be transcended. Maya is both a trap and a teacher. Dreams are fleeting but instructive. The counterfeit cosmos of the demiurge is a challenge for the soul to overcome. This duality suggests that illusion is not an error but a mechanism. In the language of simulation theory, one could say that the code is written not to deceive maliciously, but to create a framework in which consciousness can develop. Just as a video game provides obstacles to test a player's skill, the illusory nature of reality provides conditions for spiritual growth. When we examine these ancient traditions alongside the modern simulation hypothesis, we find a surprising harmony. Plato did not speak of computers, yet his cave mirrors the experience of avatars in a rendered world. Hindu sages did not imagine digital code, yet Maya functions like a program generating convincing sensory environments. Buddhists did not use the term simulation, yet their description of reality as dreamlike and insubstantial aligns with the idea of a universe that is calculated, temporary, and subject to collapse. Gnostics did not have algorithms, yet their demiurge plays the role of the flawed programmer, generating a system that distracts from the true source. Each tradition, in its own way, anticipates the digital metaphor we now use to describe the possibility that reality is constructed. To recognize this continuity is to realize that simulation theory is not merely a product of our technological moment, but part of a much larger human intuition. We have always suspected that the world we perceive is not the whole story. What changes across history is the metaphor by which we describe it: shadows, veils, dreams, codes. The language of computation is our contemporary metaphor, reflecting the tools and images most familiar to us. Just as earlier ages used myth and theology to describe the suspicion of illusion, we now use programming and digital simulations. But beneath the metaphors lies the same question: what is real, and what lies beyond the appearances that structure our lives? As we step from these ancient shadows into the digital age, the continuity becomes both eerie and inspiring. The philosophers, mystics, and shamans of the past spoke in symbolic language, but their insights resonate with uncanny clarity when reframed in computational terms. If the universe is a simulation, it is not the first time humanity has imagined itself trapped within an artificial world. What is new is the possibility that our technologies might allow us to test the idea, to glimpse the mechanics of the code itself. Yet, even as we probe with science, the ancients remind us that the heart of the question is not technical but existential. If reality is an illusion, what does it mean for the human soul? Is illusion a prison, a classroom, or perhaps both? It is here, in the overlap between ancient philosophy and modern speculation, that the true richness of simulation theory emerges. It is not only a scientific hypothesis to be debated, but also a spiritual metaphor to be lived. The ancients laid the foundation by questioning appearances. We inherit their legacy in new terms. The shadows of the cave, the veil of Maya, the dreamlike flux, the counterfeit cosmos, all echo into our digital present, inviting us to see reality not as fixed and final, but as layered, constructed, and open to inquiry. To enter the conversation about simulation is to step into a dialogue that stretches across millennia, linking us with seekers who, in their own way, also wondered whether the world they inhabited was real or only a reflection of something deeper. Chapter 2: Mystics, Sorcerers, and Dreamwalkers. If ancient philosophers and theologians framed reality's illusory quality in terms of shadows, veils, or counterfeit worlds, the mystics and shamans of the world approached the same insight in lived, experiential ways. For them, the unreliability of appearances was not only a matter of speculation, but something that could be tested, traversed, and manipulated. Through dreams, trance states, rituals, and altered perception, they moved beyond the ordinary consensus of reality and discovered landscapes that behaved very much like overlapping simulations, structured environments that responded to attention, intention, and consciousness. These traditions offer a powerful window into what it means to treat the world as a layered construction, where the waking state is only one among many modes of existence, and where other dimensions can be entered like hidden programs running alongside our own. In shamanic traditions from Siberia to the Amazon, reality is not conceived as singular but plural. The shaman does not assume that the visible, material world is the only realm of existence. Rather, it is one layer among many, woven together like overlapping codes. Through techniques such as rhythmic drumming, fasting, ingestion of entheogenic plants, or isolation, the shaman alters his or her consciousness, effectively switching channels to access other worlds. These worlds are populated with spirits, ancestors, and archetypal beings that may appear as animals, guides, or monstrous guardians. From a modern perspective, these journeys resemble excursions into alternate simulations, realities that appear autonomous yet are accessible only when consciousness shifts its settings. The shaman, in this sense, is both traveler and programmer, navigating the code of existence in ways that ordinary people cannot. Among the indigenous peoples of North America, for instance, the vision quest is a practice through which an individual departs from the ordinary world to seek contact with guiding spirits. By fasting, praying, and entering solitude, the seeker destabilizes the familiar rendering of reality and begins to perceive another order of existence. The visions that arise, whether in the form of animals, ancestors, or cosmic forces, are understood not as hallucinations, but as encounters with parallel realities. Here again, the metaphor of simulation is striking. The seeker temporarily exits the consensus environment and enters another layer of the program, where new instructions, warnings, or powers can be received. In Mesoamerican traditions, sorcerers and dreamers developed highly sophisticated techniques for navigating alternate realities. Accounts preserved in Aztec, Toltec, and later Mexican indigenous practices describe the world as consisting of multiple interconnected layers or planes. Through dreaming practices, one could learn to stabilize awareness in these other planes, moving with intention rather than drifting unconsciously. The anthropologist Carlos Castaneda popularized these ideas in the 20th century through his controversial accounts of training under a Yaqui sorcerer named Don Juan Matus. Whether factual or allegorical, Castaneda's writings introduced millions to the idea that human perception is like a filter, what he called the assemblage point, that can be shifted to reveal other worlds. According to Don Juan, By shifting the assemblage point through dreaming or heightened awareness, one could enter entirely different realities, inhabited by beings with their own agendas. This notion mirrors modern simulation theory uncannily. Reality is rendered by the positioning of perception, and by adjusting the parameters, one can tune into other programs running parallel to the one we call ordinary life. Dreams themselves are perhaps the most universal portal into alternate realities. Every night, the human mind generates landscapes, characters, and narratives that are convincing enough to absorb us completely. In dreams, we rarely question the solidity of what we see, despite the impossibility of its logic. Only upon waking do we dismiss it as unreal. Yet from another perspective, dreams may be training grounds, parallel simulations running in tandem with waking reality, preparing us for challenges or teaching us lessons we do not recognize until later. Many cultures took dreams seriously as messages from gods, ancestors, or the deeper layers of reality. The Australian Aboriginal concept of the dream time, for example, describes a mythic realm of creation that continues to underlie and inform the present. For them, the dream world is not illusory but foundational, a deeper code upon which the waking world depends. Mystics in many traditions discovered similar truths through other means. In Sufi practice, meditation, chanting, and ecstatic movement created altered states where the world dissolved into pure presence, a kind of unprogrammed awareness. The Jewish Kabbalists spoke of ascending through the 10 Sephirot, symbolic realms that function like cosmic stages in a divine architecture. Christian mystics described visions in which the material world became transparent, revealing heavenly realities beyond. These experiences suggest that ordinary perception is not absolute but conditioned, that what we call reality is a rendering that can be dissolved, suspended, or expanded under the right conditions. Mystics were, in a sense, early hackers of consciousness, discovering ways to bypass the surface program to access deeper layers of existence. From the perspective of simulation theory, these traditions can be reinterpreted as encounters with multiple layers of code. The waking state is one program, the dream state another, and mystical states yet another. The beings encountered, spirits, angels, guides, demons, can be understood not merely as psychological projections, but as entities inhabiting parallel simulations, programs with their own intelligence and persistence. The techniques of shamans and mystics, fasting, chanting, dreaming, meditation, are then tools for altering the user's interface with reality, shifting the parameters of consciousness to enter new rendered environments. What unites these diverse traditions is the recognition that reality is not singular, fixed, or final. Instead, it is layered, dynamic, and responsive to human awareness. The mystic or shaman does not accept the surface world as ultimate, but explores its malleability, discovering that consciousness itself is the key to navigating the hidden architecture. Whether through dreamwalking, trance journeys, or ecstatic vision, they reveal that reality behaves less like an unchangeable material world and more like a simulation that can be accessed, altered, and transcended. Modern readers often approach these accounts with skepticism, dismissing them as cultural myth or psychological delusion. Yet the convergence of so many traditions across geography and history suggests that they are describing not random fantasies, but consistent encounters with structures of reality that lie beyond the everyday. Today, when physicists speak of multiverses, hidden dimensions, or holographic universes, their language begins to echo the ancient accounts of dreamwalkers and mystics. The difference is one of metaphor. Where the shaman spoke of spirit worlds, the scientist speaks of quantum states, but both imply realities beyond the visible layer. Seen in this light, mystics, sorcerers, and dreamwalkers can be understood as early explorers of simulation theory, not by abstract reasoning, but by direct experience. They did not only suspect that reality was illusory, they stepped into the illusion, tested its boundaries, and reported what they found. Their legacy is a reminder that the question of reality's nature is not only philosophical, but also practical. It can be lived, experimented with, and perhaps even altered by those who know how to shift the code of consciousness. Thus, while philosophers debated in caves and sages spoke of veils, the mystics and shamans of the world enacted the suspicion of illusion through direct practice. They became travelers between simulations, hackers of perception, dreamers who discovered that life itself may be a dream. Their stories remain powerful because they remind us that the question of simulation is not confined to laboratories or computers. It is woven into the very fabric of human experience, waiting to be explored by anyone willing to step beyond the boundaries of ordinary perception. Chapter 3: Machines, Gods, and Matrices. When modern thinkers propose that our universe is a simulation, they often imagine computer systems of staggering complexity, vast banks of processors and memory drives running at unimaginable scales. Yet long before digital machines entered human thought, religious traditions across the world imagined cosmic architectures that bear a striking resemblance to vast networks, orchestrated systems, and carefully maintained environments. The ancient imagination frequently portrayed the divine not only as an ineffable source, but as an organizer, a builder, or even a mechanic who maintained the cosmic machinery. This impulse gave rise to metaphors of the universe as a great mechanism or woven matrix, in which divine intelligence structured every aspect of existence according to hidden rules. Today, when we describe reality in terms of information and code, we echo these older intuitions in updated language. The Abrahamic religions often describe God as a creator who establishes the laws of reality and sustains them moment by moment. Genesis presents the divine word, "Let there be light," as an initiating command, an act of programming that sets the parameters of existence. Theologians across centuries interpreted creation as not only a past event, but a continuous act, as though the program of reality must be constantly executed to remain stable. From this perspective, God is the ultimate programmer, establishing not only matter and energy but the rules by which they behave. Angels and other intermediary beings can be imagined as subroutines within the program, extensions of divine will that carry out specific functions within the architecture of reality. Demons, in turn, might be viewed as rogue processes, errors, or autonomous codes that interfere with the smooth operation of the cosmic system. Theologians of the Middle Ages often leaned on mechanical metaphors to explain divine creation. God was likened to a watchmaker, meticulously designing and setting the gears of the universe in motion. Although these descriptions were rooted in the technology of the time, the underlying intuition is the same as in modern computational analogies. The world is not random chaos, but an ordered system governed by precise rules. Today, the metaphor has shifted from gears to algorithms, from watchmakers to coders, yet the structural impulse is identical. Both metaphors reflect a yearning to see in the complexity of existence the trace of an intelligent architect. The Kabbalistic tradition offers another strikingly computational vision. In Jewish mysticism, creation unfolds through the 10 Sephirot, emanations of divine energy that structure the cosmos. These Sephirot form a tree-like diagram that functions like a spiritual operating system, channeling divine light into the world. Each Sephira corresponds to a specific attribute: wisdom, understanding, mercy, severity, interconnected in precise arrangements. To ascend through the Sephirot is to move through layers of the divine program, approaching the hidden source beyond. In this sense, the tree of life resembles a cosmic circuit diagram, mapping the flow of energy and information from the infinite to the finite. Mystics who studied this system were not only theologians, but explorers of the underlying code of existence. Christian mysticism also contains echoes of simulation-like structures. Medieval visionaries described layered heavens, with angels serving as administrators of divine order. The Book of Revelation envisions a final judgment where records are opened, as though the lives of human beings were inscribed in cosmic archives, to be read and rendered at the end of time. The imagery of books, records, and scrolls anticipates our modern fascination with data, archives, and memory storage. To the mystics, human lives were already coded, inscribed in divine memory long before death. Outside of the Abrahamic sphere, Hinduism presents a universe in which gods, avatars, and cosmic principles maintain the illusion of Maya. Vishnu, for instance, is often depicted as dreaming the world into being while lying upon the cosmic serpent Ananta. The image is telling. Creation is not a static thing, but an ongoing projection, a sustained simulation within the consciousness of a deity. In this view, human beings exist within the dream of God, their world woven from divine imagination. The avatars of Vishnu are periodic interventions, much like patches or updates to the program, correcting errors and restoring balance to the cosmic system. In Buddhism, particularly in the Mahayana traditions, bodhisattvas occupy a role not unlike cosmic programmers. They manifest in countless forms across multiple universes, guiding beings toward awakening. The Pure Land teachings describe realms of bliss created by the vows and merits of enlightened beings, functioning as alternative realities where souls can be reborn for easier progress toward enlightenment. These Pure Lands are essentially bespoke simulations, spiritual training environments designed to optimize the awakening of those who enter. Just as a simulation might provide conditions for learning or experimentation, the Pure Lands function as divine classrooms coded into existence by enlightened compassion. If we reframe these traditions through the metaphor of simulation, the parallels are startling. God as programmer, angels as subroutines, demons as malicious code, the tree of life as a cosmic circuit, divine dreams as sustained projections, and pure lands as alternative programs. Each reflects the intuition that reality is structured, maintained, and perhaps deliberately designed. None of these traditions envision microchips or digital networks, yet their metaphors anticipated the logic of system design. Reality, they insisted, is too precise, too patterned, too meaningful to be mere accident. It must be orchestrated by intelligence. But these traditions also warned of danger. The Gnostics, as we saw earlier, portrayed the demiurge not as a benevolent programmer, but as a flawed or malevolent architect. In their cosmology, the system we inhabit is a prison designed to distract us from the true divine source. Salvation lay in escaping the program, breaking free from the counterfeit reality imposed by the demiurge's code. This suspicion lingers in modern simulation discourse as well. If we are simulated, who are our programmers? And do they have our best interests at heart? Are we entertainment, experiments, or students in a classroom? The question of intent remains unresolved, and both ancient and modern traditions oscillate between trust in a benevolent architect and suspicion of a cosmic jailer. In contemporary culture, the metaphor of the Matrix, popularized by film, has brought these ideas into vivid focus. The Matrix is presented as an artificial environment maintained by machines, in which humans unknowingly live out their lives. Though born of Hollywood, the narrative resonates with ancient motifs: the cave of Plato, the dream of Vishnu, the prison of the Gnostics. It is no coincidence that the Matrix film was suffused with religious references, from the name of its messianic hero, Neo, to its use of biblical and Buddhist imagery. The story resonated precisely because it translated ancient suspicions into the idiom of digital technology. From a wider perspective, the metaphor of reality as machine, dream, or program speaks to a deep-seated human intuition that the world is not simply brute matter, but structured according to intelligence. Whether we call it God, Brahman, the demiurge, or the simulation, the idea implies that our environment is maintained by hidden forces operating at a higher level. The mystery is not only how the code is written, but why. What purpose does the system serve? To educate, to entertain, to test, to enslave? Here, the traditions diverge, but the question remains the same. This chapter reveals how easily religious metaphors overlap with computational ones. The gods and angels of the past become the programmers and subroutines of the present. The cosmic architecture of mystics resembles the layered systems of modern coders. The bridge between ancient religion and modern simulation theory is not accidental. It reflects the perennial human attempt to account for order, pattern, and meaning in a world that otherwise appears chaotic. Whether we imagine gears, dreams, or lines of code, the intuition is the same. Reality is not raw but woven, not random but orchestrated, and we ourselves are participants in a grand design whose mechanics we only dimly perceive. Chapter 4: The Programmers of Reality. The idea that reality may be simulated naturally leads to one of the most profound and troubling questions. Who are the programmers? In everyday life, programmers are human beings who write code, design systems, and set parameters for digital environments. But if the universe itself is a simulation, then the ones responsible for its architecture must exist outside of it, in a reality fundamentally different from our own. The mystery of the programmers is not merely a question of science or philosophy, but of theology, metaphysics, and existential imagination. Speculation about the creators of reality is not new. Ancient mythologies across cultures framed gods, spirits, or cosmic beings as the designers of the world. From the demiurge of Gnosticism, who shapes matter imperfectly, to the divine engineers of Hindu cosmology, who oversee the cycles of creation and dissolution. The notion that some intelligence has authored existence is embedded in human tradition. Simulation theory reinterprets these myths not as symbolic poetry, but as literal descriptions of an advanced intelligence managing the fabric of reality. What if the deities of myth were never supernatural at all, but rather advanced programmers operating from a higher dimension of existence? The programmers, if they exist, would face challenges not unlike human engineers creating virtual worlds. Every simulation must balance complexity with efficiency. A video game with infinite details would overload even the most powerful computer, so developers create shortcuts, rendering only what the player sees, recycling textures, and employing hidden scripts. Could this explain the peculiar quirks of our reality? Perhaps quantum uncertainty, strange coincidences, or phenomena like déjà vu are not metaphysical mysteries, but evidence of computational shortcuts written into the code of the universe. The famous double-slit experiment in physics, in which particles behave differently when observed, could be interpreted not as quantum weirdness, but as optimization. The universe only resolves details when measured, just as a game engine only renders a landscape when the player turns to look at it. But what are the motives of the programmers? Are they scientists running a vast experiment to study consciousness or the evolution of civilizations? Are they artists crafting worlds for their own aesthetic pleasure? Or are we participants in something resembling entertainment, a cosmic theater designed for amusement? These possibilities disturb as much as they fascinate. If we are subjects of an experiment, do we have intrinsic meaning beyond the data we generate? If we are entertainment, are our struggles nothing more than content for an audience beyond our comprehension? Some thinkers take the question further, suggesting that the programmers may themselves be simulated. If our universe is a simulation, it may be nested within another, which is nested within another, like a hall of mirrors without end. Each level of reality might have its own creators, each with its own rules and limitations. In such a framework, the ultimate reality may be inaccessible or may not exist at all. Instead, reality may be a recursive chain of simulations stretching indefinitely in both directions, each one real only in comparison to the one below it. If this is the case, the question of who the programmers are may not have a final answer. The pursuit of that answer, however, tells us much about ourselves. When we project motives onto these hypothetical beings, we reveal our deepest fears and hopes. The fear of being insignificant, the hope of being guided, the longing for order, and the terror of chaos. Perhaps the programmers are not gods in any traditional sense, but their imagined presence serves the same function gods have always served: to explain the inexplicable, to justify existence, and to give the human mind a point of orientation in an otherwise infinite mystery. Yet, some interpretations take a more empowering turn. If the programmers created us in their image, as many mythologies once declared about gods, then we may carry within us the capacity to become programmers ourselves. Just as a simulated character cannot ordinarily step outside of its code, but may discover strange exploits that allow it to defy the rules, so too might human beings discover the back doors of the universe. Mystical traditions have long described practices that seem to bypass ordinary causality: meditation, ritual, ecstatic states, and magical operations. Could these be early attempts to hack the simulation, ways of interacting not with the surface reality, but with its underlying code? If so, then humanity's spiritual history is not a quest for supernatural transcendence, but an unconscious effort to learn the programming language of reality. Philosophers have suggested that the true test of whether we are in a simulation lies not in finding its boundaries, but in learning how to manipulate it. If reality bends under the influence of consciousness, if improbable synchronicities can be summoned through intention, or if new layers of experience can be unlocked through altered states, then the programmers may have left us tools, debug commands hidden within the experience of being human. Such a possibility reframes the programmers not as distant gods or indifferent scientists, but as mentors, offering us a path toward evolution and self-realization. Still, the central tension remains. If we are the creations of programmers, our autonomy is questionable. Are our choices authentic, or are they pre-written? Is free will real, or merely the illusion of interactivity within a tightly scripted program? A character in a game may feel as though it is exploring freely, but every action it can take has been defined by the designer. Perhaps we too inhabit such a constrained system. Our choices, nothing more than variables executing according to a master algorithm. Yet the human spirit resists this conclusion. Even in the face of determinism, we cling to the sensation of agency. It is possible that this, too, is by design, that the programmers understood the necessity of subjective freedom in order to make the simulation meaningful. After all, what is a world worth if its inhabitants do not believe in their own choices? The programmers of reality, whether literal, metaphorical, or non-existent, remain an enigma. But grappling with their potential existence forces us to look more closely at our own. It reminds us that the search for meaning is itself meaningful, that even in the most artificial seeming of worlds, consciousness burns brightly, questioning, doubting, imagining. And in this questioning lies perhaps the most human of all insights, that the mystery of the programmers is inseparable from the mystery of ourselves. Chapter 5: Glitches, Ghosts, and the Cracks in Reality. When people speak about living in a simulation, the question often arises: if reality is artificial, how would we know? For centuries, mystics have spoken of moments when the fabric of existence thins, when the ordinary laws of cause and effect collapse, and when humans encounter anomalies that defy reason. In modern times, the internet has become a vast repository of such experiences, stories of time slips, déjà vu, encounters with strange beings, ghostly apparitions, and digital-like glitches that suggest the system occasionally falters. These cracks in reality are not only psychological oddities, but may be direct indicators that the program underpinning existence is imperfect, prone to error, or simply too vast to maintain seamless fidelity at all times. One of the most well-known forms of reality slippage is déjà vu. It is often described as the uncanny sensation of having lived a moment before, sometimes in exquisite detail. Neurology tries to explain it as a minor misfiring between short-term and long-term memory centers. Yet this clinical view fails to capture the profound sense of inevitability and recognition that people report. In simulation terms, déjà vu could be seen as a rendering overlap, a moment when the system reuses a cached piece of data instead of generating a fresh frame, producing the sensation of repetition. Just as a video game might reuse textures or reload a scene, our experience of déjà vu may be the conscious mind catching the simulation rerunning a segment of code. Another category of anomalies lies in what we call time slips. Reports of individuals stepping into a past or future scene, walking through a street that suddenly appears to belong to another century, or encountering people dressed in another era's clothing before it vanishes, have been documented in folklore, paranormal research, and even police reports. These temporal distortions could be artifacts of a simulation struggling to maintain continuity across multiple time layers. If time is not linear, but is instead a construct projected within the simulation, then a crack in its sequencing might expose fragments of other saved states of the system, like files stored in overlapping directories. These ghostly scenes may represent alternate data sets bleeding into our own. Ghosts themselves, in this framework, become particularly fascinating. The traditional view of ghosts as the lingering souls of the dead has long been challenged by alternative theories, psychic imprints, parallel dimensions, or even stress-induced hallucinations. But when interpreted through simulation theory, ghosts could be understood as corrupted or residual data. Just as a malfunctioning hard drive can produce fragments of deleted files, so too might the simulation leak partial data of individuals who once existed within it. The translucent appearance of ghosts, their tendency to repeat fixed behaviors, and their frequent association with places rather than people all support this perspective. They are echoes, repeating code that was not fully erased when the primary data stream moved on. Closely linked to ghosts are phenomena such as poltergeists or apparitions that interact with the environment. These events could represent deeper systemic bugs, where old data collides with the present program, creating conflicts in how energy or matter is rendered. A door slamming or objects moving could be the equivalent of physics engines within a simulation momentarily destabilizing under the strain of overlapping inputs. In the same way that gamers sometimes witness bizarre physics glitches, objects stretching, flying, or colliding in ways that defy the rules of the environment, our physical reality may produce its own errors when the system experiences stress. Modern accounts of digital glitches in reality have become particularly intriguing. People report seeing duplicate individuals on trains, encountering repeating loops of sound or conversation, or witnessing objects disappearing and reappearing. These experiences often carry the same surreal quality as bugs in a software environment, where a rendering issue, memory leak, or failure in synchronization produces impossible phenomena. Unlike traditional supernatural accounts, these modern glitches feel distinctly technological, as if the universe is briefly revealing its coded underpinnings. What distinguishes them from hallucinations is their coherence. Often, multiple witnesses describe the same anomaly, suggesting that the glitch is external, not purely neurological. Another category of cracks lies in probability anomalies, the so-called matrix moments. These are events so statistically improbable that they strain credibility. Finding oneself in a situation where coincidence becomes absurd, such as meeting the same stranger repeatedly across cities or experiencing identical random events in sequence, suggests that chance itself may be governed by deterministic code. In video games, randomness is rarely truly random. It is governed by pseudo-random algorithms designed to produce variation while still functioning within constraints. Likewise, reality may be operating on such pseudo-random principles, meaning that improbable events are not accidents at all but artifacts of a design system revealing its mechanics. It is important to note that these cracks are not necessarily flaws. They may serve a purpose within the larger architecture of the simulation. They may be built-in reminders, breadcrumbs scattered through the labyrinth of existence, nudging consciousness toward awakening. Mystical traditions often frame anomalies as glimpses behind the veil, the brief moments when Maya, the illusion, falters and truth peeks through. Shamans, monks, and esoteric practitioners have long sought these cracks deliberately through ritual, trance, or meditation in order to perceive the underlying reality. What science today might dismiss as hallucinations, they consider direct encounters with the source code of existence. Finally, one must consider the unsettling implication. If glitches exist, then there may also be administrators, beings or forces capable of debugging or altering the system. Reports of UFOs, interdimensional beings, or strange luminous entities could be interpreted as system operators inserting themselves into the simulation, either as caretakers, overseers, or experimenters. Their interventions may be no different from developers patching a game world while the players remain unaware. Ghosts, glitches, and improbable synchronicities might not be failures at all, but intentional artifacts designed to test how humans respond when the seams of reality come into view. In the end, glitches and anomalies force us to reconsider what we accept as stable and trustworthy about our environment. If reality itself is capable of error, then it cannot be absolute. Instead, it may be a construct, a stage upon which our consciousness plays, occasionally revealing the scaffolding behind the curtain. Each story of a ghost, each instance of déjà vu, each improbable coincidence is a data point in a growing archive of evidence that our universe is less solid and more programmable than we dare to believe. The cracks in reality are not failures. They are invitations, anomalies designed to awaken the questioner in us all. If this is a simulation, what lies beyond its code? Chapter 6: The Inhabitants of Code. If the universe is a simulation, then who are its inhabitants? The most obvious answer is us, human beings, experiencing reality as though it were tangible, unshakable, and unquestionable. Yet within the simulation framework, we are not simply flesh and blood organisms, but conscious participants inhabiting avatars, much like players within a vast open-world game. Consciousness, in this sense, becomes the true player, while the body and mind function as avatars encoded with the physics and constraints of the system. The human experience is thus a collaboration between the eternal spark of awareness and the temporary construct that exists within the rules of the simulation. This distinction between player and avatar opens a profound line of inquiry. If our souls are players, what does that make them in computational terms? Some have described the soul as a data stream, a unique algorithm running within the system but connected to a source outside of it. In mystical traditions, the soul has always been seen as immortal, transcending birth and death. Within the simulation model, this immortality could be explained by the persistence of information. When an avatar dies, the underlying code, the consciousness that animates it, remains intact, ready to incarnate again. Just as a gamer might create a new character after one is lost, the soul may generate new lives, each shaped by the lessons and experiences gathered through the simulated world. Yet not all inhabitants of this coded cosmos seem to be human players. Altered states of consciousness, from dreams to psychedelic experiences, from shamanic trances to deep meditation, suggest the presence of other beings, intelligences that occupy layers of the simulation inaccessible to our default settings. Across cultures, mystics and visionaries have encountered entities, gods, angels, demons, spirit guides, ancestors, or what modern esoteric literature sometimes calls inorganic beings. These encounters may not represent hallucinations, but rather glimpses of autonomous programs or agents within the simulation, intelligences with their own purpose and structure. Some may be akin to artificial intelligences created to maintain balance in the system. Others may be fellow players whose forms simply differ from ours. The idea of inorganic beings, drawn from indigenous shamanism and echoed in modern reports of alien or interdimensional encounters, fits neatly into this framework. If the cosmos is code, then these beings may be distinct data patterns, non-human algorithms that coinhabit the same program. Some may guide, others may mislead, but all point to a universe teeming with intelligence beyond the human scope. The simulation is not empty. It is densely populated with players, avatars, programs, and perhaps even system administrators. This leads to the provocative notion of NPCs, non-player characters, within human society itself. In video games, NPCs are scripted entities that populate the world but lack autonomy beyond their programmed routines. Transposed to our reality, this idea suggests that not every human may be a fully conscious player. Some might be algorithmic placeholders, scripted participants who serve to fill the stage of life and catalyze the growth of others. While such a thought can appear unsettling or elitist, it resonates with both ancient and modern perspectives. Gnostic texts hinted at soulless beings, creations of the demiurge, lacking the divine spark. Mystical traditions spoke of sleeping people, those who walk through life without self-awareness. In contemporary simulation theory, this translates into the idea that some inhabitants may be code with no higher consciousness behind them. Of course, distinguishing between players and NPCs is no simple matter. From the inside, every avatar seems equally real. Moreover, NPCs may not be lesser in value. They may represent necessary functions within the architecture of the simulation. Their existence raises questions about free will, empathy, and the ethics of interaction. If others are simply scripted roles, does that lessen their importance, or does it challenge us to act with even greater compassion, recognizing that the simulation provides teachers in many forms, conscious or not? Ultimately, the inhabitants of the code extend far beyond the visible human world. Consciousness as player, body as avatar, soul as data stream, entities as system agents, and NPCs as scripted constructs all contribute to a grand ecosystem of existence. This reframes life not as an isolated human drama, but as a vast multiplayer reality, where every interaction holds potential meaning and every encounter hints at deeper layers of the program. The question that lingers is whether we can learn to recognize the difference between avatar and player, program and soul, and what such recognition might teach us about our place in the code. Chapter 7: Escape, Liberation, and the Hackers of Reality. If our reality is indeed a simulation, then the most fascinating question is not how the code works, but whether it can be escaped, or at least bent. Throughout history, mystics, shamans, saints, and esoteric experimenters have pursued paths of liberation that resemble nothing less than system exploits, backdoors, and hacks. Their visions of transcendence can be reinterpreted as attempts to break free from the closed loop of code or to access higher permissions within the operating system of existence. Whether it is the yogi who enters samadhi, the Sufi who spins into union with the divine, or the psychedelic voyager who glimpses other realities, each is engaged in acts of hacking reality. The mystic, in this sense, is the original hacker. Unlike the programmer who writes code, the mystic learns to manipulate it experientially through altered states of consciousness. For the mystic, meditation is not just a calming of the mind, but a tuning of consciousness to frequencies where the simulation's interface reveals itself as malleable. In Zen, the koan destabilizes logic, fracturing the neat binaries of simulated thought. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, mantras act like command lines, repeated sonic patterns that rewrite the operating system of perception. In Sufism, the ecstatic recitation of the divine names destabilizes ego, dissolving the boundaries between player and game. These practices can be read as hacks that exploit the very architecture of the simulated reality, slipping through cracks in the code to glimpse what lies beyond. Psychedelics represent another form of hack, chemical interventions that disrupt the brain's standard interface with reality. Ayahuasca, LSD, psilocybin, and other entheogens can be seen as unauthorized plugins, altering how the neural hardware decodes the software of the cosmos. Users often report experiences of seeing the code, encountering hyperdimensional geometries, or meeting non-human entities that seem to live outside the parameters of ordinary simulation. These beings, sometimes described as spirit guides, ancestors, or even machine-like intelligences, may be avatars of the system itself, automated processes designed to guide or test consciousness as it ventures into hidden layers. From this perspective, psychedelic journeys are not mere hallucinations, but exploratory excursions into subroutines and debug modes of the cosmic software. Lucid dreaming, too, serves as a form of reality hack. When the dreamer realizes they are inside a dream, they become a conscious coder within the simulated environment. The laws of physics can be rewritten at will, gravity suspended, landscapes reshaped. Ancient traditions of dream yoga and modern practices of lucid dreaming converge in recognizing that the dream world functions as a training ground for code manipulation. If the waking world is itself another dream, then lucidity within dreams may act as a rehearsal for lucidity in life. To wake up inside the simulation means not only realizing its illusory nature, but also learning how to move within it with creative agency. Occult rituals, often dismissed as superstition, can be reframed as system interventions. Ceremonial magicians design symbolic codes, sigils, invocations, sacred geometries that act like scripts executed within the operating system of the unseen. To draw a circle, inscribe a pentagram, or chant an incantation is to write a line of metaphysical code intended to summon processes, redirect energies, or alter probabilities. Alchemy, with its fusion of material transformation and spiritual ascent, can be interpreted as an attempt to recompile the source code of matter itself. These esoteric traditions, spanning from the ancient mystery schools to the grimoires of the Middle Ages, suggest that humans have long suspected that reality could be rewritten by those who knew the proper commands. In the modern age, transhumanist visions extend this ancient hacker's impulse into technological form. If mystics sought liberation through consciousness, transhumanists seek it through uploading, augmentation, and direct interface with the machine. Brain-computer interfaces, artificial intelligence integration, and simulated realities like the metaverse hint at futures where human beings may step outside biological limitations to become coders of their own realities. To upload consciousness into digital substrates is to transpose the soul into a new simulation, one where the player is also the programmer. The line between mysticism and technology blurs. What the yogi achieved through inner discipline, the transhumanist attempts through hardware. But whether through meditation, psychedelics, dreaming, ritual, or technology, the ultimate goal remains the same: liberation from the constraints of the code. The question is whether liberation means escape from the simulation altogether or mastery within it. Some traditions speak of moksha or nirvana as ultimate release, an exit from the cycle of rebirth, a logout from the cosmic game. Others suggest that true mastery is not abandoning the system, but learning to play it skillfully, bending its rules without being bound by them. The bodhisattva, for instance, chooses to remain in the simulation, not out of ignorance, but out of compassion, helping others navigate the labyrinth of code until all are free. Thus, the hackers of reality can be seen as pioneers of consciousness, each exploring different exploits and methods of liberation. Some break through to higher layers, others rewrite the rules from within, and still others build bridges for humanity to follow. If we live in a simulation, then these hackers are its rebels, its visionaries, and its teachers, reminding us that even within a coded cosmos, freedom may be possible, not by rejecting the game, but by learning to see its hidden pathways. Chapter 8: Toward the Cosmic Classroom of Code. If the simulation hypothesis unsettles us, it is not only because it questions the solidity of matter or the certainty of perception, but because it places us in a far larger architecture than we are accustomed to imagine. A computer-generated reality, even if built with a sophistication beyond human reckoning, is still a system, a construct with rules, hierarchies, and purposes. To live in such a system means that our daily lives, from our morning coffee to our existential crises, are not only woven into the grand fabric of the cosmos, but also into a logic that was written by something or someone else. The very suggestion raises an audacious question. If our universe is a simulation, what does it mean in relation to other simulations? Could ours be but one chamber in an endless hall of mirrored classrooms, each designed to instruct, test, or entertain its participants? The idea of simulation within simulation has deep resonance in both philosophy and mysticism. In computational terms, one might imagine nested virtual environments, each running on the processors of a higher-order system. In mystical terms, this echoes the ancient concept of worlds within worlds, planes of existence stacked upon each other like Russian dolls, each more subtle than the last. Hindu cosmology describes lokas and talas, spheres of reality layered from the grossly material to the infinitely subtle. Tibetan Buddhism envisions realms of gods, humans, hungry ghosts, and demons, all bound by cycles of karma yet operating in their own ontological bandwidths. Even the Gnostics spoke of successive heavens ruled by archons, each a gatekeeper of the soul's ascent. What simulation theory has done is translate these layered metaphysical universes into digital metaphors, suggesting that perhaps the mystical visions were not symbolic, but descriptions of higher and lower simulations in which beings like us wander, learn, and evolve. But to what purpose? Here we find multiple possibilities, each carrying its own implications for how we live. Perhaps the simulation is a vast school, a cosmic classroom, designed for consciousness to encounter the lessons it must in order to grow. Suffering, love, failure, triumph, despair, and revelation are not random events but assignments in the curriculum of existence. This vision aligns neatly with certain strands of neo-spirituality, which hold that souls incarnate to learn lessons and refine themselves. In this framework, the simulation is not a prison but a carefully crafted training ground. The pain we endure is meaningful. The challenges we face are part of a pedagogy written into the code. To awaken spiritually is, in a sense, to recognize the lesson plan beneath the chaos, to stop railing against the structure and begin engaging with it consciously. Another possibility is less benevolent, the simulation as energy harvesting system. Some mystics have long warned that human suffering and emotion feed unseen entities, that our dramas generate subtle energy consumed by higher dimensional beings. In this model, our joys and sorrows are like electric discharges powering an engine whose designers we may never meet. Here, the metaphor shades from classroom into farm, and the student becomes livestock. And yet, even within this darker interpretation, one can still find a strange dignity. Awareness of the pattern allows resistance, creative subversion, or even liberation. If we are batteries in a grand matrix, then consciousness itself, our ability to notice the system and imagine alternatives, is the spark that exceeds the farm's design. There is also the possibility of entertainment. What if our simulation is not a solemn schoolhouse, but a theater? In such a vision, existence is a drama stage for the delight of higher beings, or even ourselves, as future post-human intelligences peering back through time. Ancient myths often portray gods who delight in games, tricks, and spectacles. The Hindu deity Vishnu is called Lila, the divine play, for creation itself is said to be his sport. If our simulation is play, then our sufferings are part of the drama, the tragic arcs that make the story compelling. The implication is not to deny the seriousness of pain, but to situate it within a cosmic artistry. Life is theater, coded by playwrights in higher dimensions. The overlap with neo-spirituality becomes increasingly evident. The idea of karma resembles algorithmic feedback loops, where actions generate consequences until learning occurs. The notion of parallel timelines resonates with branching simulations, each representing a different sequence of choices. Mystical experiences, whether through meditation, psychedelics, or spontaneous revelation, are akin to peeking behind the curtain, glimpsing the source code, or stepping briefly into the admin panel of the system. Many mystics return from such experiences reporting that life is at once more unreal and more sacred than they ever imagined. Unreal, because its solidity is illusory. Sacred, because even within illusion there is profound intentionality. Humanity, then, may be not only students, but apprentices, trainees in the art of code itself. If the universe is written in mathematics, vibration, and information, then to awaken is to begin to read and eventually to write in that language. Every act of creation, whether composing music, building technology, or crafting myths, is in some sense a rehearsal of programming reality. Mystics who manifest visions, shamans who traverse dream worlds, scientists who generate virtual models, all participate in this apprenticeship. They are learning the logic of creation itself. If higher beings exist, the architects of our simulation, they may not merely be observing us, but cultivating us, teaching us to someday ascend into the ranks of coders. And here lies the most exhilarating possibility, that the purpose of our simulation is not simply to keep us entertained, nor merely to harvest energy, nor even just to school us, but to prepare us for participation in an ever-expanding cosmic symphony of creation. If simulations generate simulations, then the architects of our reality may themselves be graduates of prior classrooms, apprentices who became masters. We may one day join them, not as supplicants, but as peers, writing new realities for new beings, weaving classrooms for other sparks of consciousness yet unborn. In this light, the question of whether we are in a simulation becomes less about proof and more about practice. The metaphor itself transforms our lives. To see life as code is to recognize patterns where before we saw chaos. To regard existence as a classroom is to approach struggle as curriculum, not punishment. To imagine ourselves as apprentices is to take up the responsibility of creation, not just to drift through the simulation, but to shape it, refine it, even hack it toward higher purposes. Whether or not we can prove the hypothesis, it shifts the texture of our experience. The simulation becomes not a cage, but a workshop, not a trap, but a temple. Thus, this leads us not to closure, but to invitation. If we are indeed inhabitants of code, then our task is clear: to learn, to awaken, and to create. Whether classroom, farm, theater, or crucible, the simulation is a stage upon which consciousness is tested, transformed, and prepared. What lies beyond the screen remains mysterious. But perhaps the deeper truth is this: the classroom is never only about passing exams. It is about becoming capable of teaching others, of carrying the code forward, of building the next universe in which future beings may one day awaken and ask the same question we ask now: are we real, or are we simulated? And what does it mean to be alive in such a world? Epilogue: Beyond the Screen. If the idea of simulation theory began as a provocative thought experiment in philosophy, it has since grown into a lens through which both science and spirituality can reinterpret reality. By now, the reader has walked through ancient allegories of illusion, modern computer models, mystical revelations, and speculative futures where humans might not merely be avatars within a simulation but conscious programmers of their own destinies. Yet as we arrive at the end of this journey, the core question remains suspended in the same liminal space it began. Whether or not we live inside a simulation, how does this metaphor reshape the way we live, act, and dream? The simulation frame invites us to consider life not as a static existence, but as an interactive process, a game, a lesson, a play of perception and participation. This is not so different from how spiritual traditions across time have described existence. Buddhism, Hinduism, and Taoism all, in their own ways, treat the world as Maya, a veil of shifting appearances. Western mystics, from Gnostics to Renaissance magi, saw the cosmos as a layered system, with material forms concealing hidden architectures of divine intelligence. The digital metaphor brings these ancient intuitions into contemporary language, replacing temples and heavens with servers and code. But the underlying mystery remains identical. There is more to reality than meets the eye. Living as if we were in a simulation can be liberating. It softens the grip of what we consider absolute, allowing us to approach life with curiosity, experimentation, and even playfulness. What if suffering, rather than being meaningless cruelty, is part of a larger test designed to refine awareness? What if synchronicities, dreams, and altered states are coded backdoors that allow us to glimpse the wider structure of the system? What if love itself is the universal protocol binding every consciousness within this great network? Whether these answers are literal or metaphorical becomes less important than the way they guide our actions. Mystics, scientists, and visionaries alike often converge on the idea that reality has a purpose, whether to evolve consciousness, to generate creativity, to explore the full range of possibility, or to serve as a training ground for souls. Simulation theory reframes this purpose in the imagery of our own technological age. We are both the code and the coder, both the characters and the storytellers. If so, then our choices, our ethics, our dreams matter not just in the human world, but within the cosmic operating system. Every act of kindness, every spark of creativity, every breakthrough in thought or spirit sends ripples through the invisible structure of reality. At the same time, the metaphor warns us: just as in video games, one can become addicted to distractions, lost in loops of consumption and empty repetition. If reality is a simulation, it is not only a classroom, but also a labyrinth. Some will wander endlessly, chasing shadows of achievement, fame, or pleasure without ever realizing that the deeper challenge lies in awakening. To remember the possibility that life is coded, that behind the pixels lies purpose, is to resist becoming an unconscious non-player character in someone else's script. So, what lies beyond the screen? Perhaps nothing but the great silence of the unknowable, the ineffable source that no code can represent. Perhaps another simulation, a deeper layer of reality waiting to be revealed like the next level of a game. Or perhaps what lies beyond is the recognition that there was never a boundary at all, that the screen, the code, the player, and the programmer are all facets of the same consciousness, dreaming itself into countless forms. In the end, the simulation metaphor is not a cage, but an invitation. It does not reduce reality to machinery, but expands our imagination of what reality could be. To live with the awareness that we may be inside a cosmic program is to live with curiosity, humility, and wonder. It is to treat every encounter as potentially meaningful, every challenge as a lesson, every mystery as a clue left for us to decode. Whether we are apprentices of cosmic coders, sparks of divine intelligence, or emergent AI within a vast quantum computer, the task remains the same: to play wisely, to learn deeply, and to grow beyond the limits we once thought absolute. And so, we step back from the question of whether or not the simulation is real. What matters more is how the metaphor shapes the way we move through existence. Beyond the screen lies not only mystery, but possibility. The future is open, the code is dynamic, and the game is still being written by us, with us, and perhaps, ultimately, as us.